You were once a human baby. You could not walk. You could not talk. You could not feed yourself. You could not even keep your own body warm. You weighed about 3 kilograms, and you had no idea what a predator was. But the predator knew exactly what you were. You were honestly a biological disaster waiting to happen. And yet you have ancestors, thousands of generations of them. Which means somewhere over and over for 300,000 years, someone figured out how to keep something this fragile alive. Not for a day, not for a week, long enough to do it again. So this isn't just an interesting question. It's personal. Because if even one of your direct ancestors had failed at this just once, you would not exist. You would simply not be here watching this. So let's start with the question nobody actually asks. Why is human birth so difficult in the first place? Most animals come out running. A baby giraffe drops 2 meters, lands, and starts walking within the hour. Even a baby chimp can cling to its mother almost immediately. A human newborn cannot do any of that. It is helpless for months, completely dependent on other people for everything. That is not a flaw, it is a trade-off. Scientists call it secondary altriciality. It means human babies are born earlier, relative to their development, than almost any other primate. Why? Because of your brain. A fully developed human brain would need a skull too large to fit through the birth canal. So evolution did something clever and a little horrifying. It made us give birth early, on purpose. At birth, your brain is only about a quarter of its adult size. A baby chimp is born already at almost half. That means years of brain growth that other animals do inside the womb, you had to do out here. Completely exposed, completely dependent. A human infant cannot survive alone, not even for a few hours. Which means the real question was never about individual skill. It was about the group. You've heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. It sounds like a nice saying, a cliché for a baby shower card. But for your ancestors, it was not a metaphor. It was a literal survival strategy. Anthropologists call it cooperative breeding. In most primates, raising a baby falls on one exhausted mother. Humans broke that pattern completely. In hunter-gatherer groups, childcare was shared across the entire community. Not as a favor, as how the group functioned. Grandmothers mattered so much, there's an entire theory named after them. It's called the grandmother hypothesis. The idea, human females live decades past their reproductive years so they can help raise their grandchildren instead. Let that sink in. Evolution decided grandmothers were worth keeping around. And the data backs it up. A grandmother nearby measurably raised a child's odds of survival. It wasn't only grandmothers. Aunts, uncles, older siblings, even unrelated adults all pitched in. In some hunter-gatherer groups studied today, fathers hold their infant nearly half the day. More involved than most fathers in the modern world. The child was wrapped in a web of relationships, not just 2 exhausted parents. This wasn't philosophy, it was engineering. Now let's talk about something that makes modern people a little uncomfortable. Breastfeeding in ancient life looked nothing like it does today. It usually continued for 2 to 4 years, sometimes longer. And it happened often. Some estimates say up to 4 times an hour in the early months. It wasn't just food, it calmed the baby's stress, and it quietly spaced births 3 to 4 years apart. Here's where it gets stranger. Wet nursing, feeding someone else's baby, was common and ancient. It kept orphaned or sick children alive. It was quite literally a shared community resource. Now picture it practically. You're a mother in the Ice Age. You need to gather food, walking kilometers over rough ground. And you need to keep a completely helpless baby alive while you do it. You cannot put the baby down, predators exist. A crying baby left alone is a beacon for anything that eats meat. The solution was elegant. Carry the baby against your body all day, every day. We now call it baby wearing. Back then it was just survival. Even a newborn's grip reflex hints at this. Touch its palm and it grabs on with surprising strength. That reflex likely evolved for one reason: clinging to a caregiver. Constant contact regulated the baby's heartbeat, breathing, and temperature. Babies who were carried more cried less. Not because they were spoiled, because a real biological need was finally being met. In societies where infants were carried all day, crying dropped by roughly half. The crying was never a personality flaw. It was an alarm, a signal built by evolution that something felt like danger. Eventually, the baby has to eat something besides milk, and this is where it gets a little gross. There were no pureed organic pouches waiting in ancient life. There was whatever the group had managed to find or kill that day. The most common method for softening food was simple. An adult chewed it first, then passed it to the baby's mouth. It sounds shocking by today's standards, but some of the bacteria passed along that way may have actually helped build the baby's immune system. Chimpanzees do this too. It's likely an extremely old behavior. Children also got bone marrow, cracked open for its dense calories. Mashed plants, eggs, small bits of fish and meat. The diet was wildly varied. And here's the twist. Ancient children's teeth were often healthier than the children who came right after them. Once farming took over and diets became mostly bread and grain, cavities went up. Turns out eating everything was healthier than eating mostly one thing. Here's something nobody tells you about ancient sleep. Nobody slept alone. In nearly every traditional culture ever studied, infants slept in physical contact with an adult all night. Not a cribs, not a separate room, a human body right there. This is called co-sleeping, and it was simply the default for over 99% of human history. Modern medicine raises real concerns about soft bedding and unsafe sleep setups. Those concerns are legitimate. But on a firm surface, with a sober, responsive adult, the ancestral pattern looked different. Co-sleeping meant steadier body temperature, steadier breathing, and far more nighttime nursing. Some researchers think a sleeping adult's own breathing may have helped regulate a baby's still unreliable breathing. The separate nursery down the hall is an extremely recent invention. Now let's be honest about the hard part. For most of human history, somewhere between 3 and 5 out of every 10 children died before the age of 5. Not because ancient parents didn't care, because they had no germ theory, no antibiotics, no vaccines. They did what they could, and some of it actually worked. Willow bark eased pain and fever. It's the original aspirin. Honey treated wounds as an antimicrobial in ancient Egypt and likely long before. Garlic had real antimicrobial power, discovered long before anyone knew why it worked. None of it could stop a serious infection, but it wasn't nothing. And every single culture on record built rituals around birth and childhood. Naming ceremonies, protective charms, rites of passage. These weren't empty superstition. They publicly bound the whole community to protecting that one child. And when children died, which happened often, the grief was real. Archaeologists have found infant burials arranged with care, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with small toys. The idea that ancient people didn't care when a child died simply isn't true. They mourned, they tried, and slowly, across thousands of years, they got a little better at it. And here's the part of this video nobody expects. A lot of what ancient humans did to raise children may have worked better than what replaced it. Not the medicine, vaccines, and clean water are not up for debate. That progress is one of humanity's greatest wins. But the social side, the constant contact, the shared care, a lot of that got quietly dismantled. The extended family that once shared the load is now scattered across cities and time zones. Constant physical contact got replaced with bouncers, swings, and playpens. The shared sleep space became a separate nursery and a cultural nervousness about needing anyone at all. None of this is anyone's fault. Cities, two-income households, distance from family, real forces, not neglect. But burnout, exhaustion, and postpartum struggles in the modern world are real, documented, and common. And when you compare that isolation to the world humans evolved in, the gap is enormous. The ancient answer to how do you keep a child alive was never alone. It wasn't even really as a couple. It was as a group. Share the load, spread the exhaustion, make sure no single person ever carries it all. That wasn't philosophy. That was engineering. So how did ancient humans actually keep children alive? They carried them constantly. They nursed them for years. They slept beside them every single night. They chewed food for them, sang to them, wrapped them in charms and rituals. And they surrounded them with a web of people who all took responsibility for that one small life. Grandmothers, aunts, uncles, neighbors, friends. That thread runs through every culture, every era, every part of the world. Children survived when they were surrounded. They struggled when they were left alone. And that part is not just ancient history. It is still true today. We built extraordinary tools to keep children physically safe. Vaccines, clean water, real medicine. That progress is genuinely, profoundly good. But the social part, the dense, overlapping, everyone shows up kind of care, that's the part we're still relearning. Ancient parents had no antibiotics, no ultrasounds, no formula, no car seats. What they had was each other. And somehow, for most of what actually keeps a child alive, that turned out to be enough. You are proof of it.